world. Let me say hi, I'm Harriet Bograd, president of Kulanu. I welcome all of those in the Zoom room and anyone else watching in the future to this program, the sixth in our series of online speakers since the COVID-19 crisis began. For those of you who are new, Kulanu supports isolated, emerging, and returning Jewish communities around the world. And we do it with the support of many volunteers and many supporters like many of you. We're working on scheduling a speaker every 2 weeks. If you have registered for today, or if you use our contact form to contact us, we will keep you informed of the upcoming schedule. We thank there are two things I want to show. We have a brand new short video about Kulanu, just a minute and 30 seconds, and we want to share that right now.
Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Oh, Davinu Chai, oh, Davinu Chai, oh, Davinu Chai, oh,
At this point, we want to thank those people who sponsored today's event. We're honoring the Zellers and the Primacks today for their amazing work in creating Kulanu and helping build a movement. And for those people who sponsored will all be getting a copy of the book that Karen Primack edited way back in 2003. And we thank all the sponsors now listed on the screen. It's not too late for you to become a sponsor if you'd like a copy of the book and would like to make a donation of $50 or more. We'll talk more about that again later. Okay, so with that, I am delighted to introduce Benita Nathan Sussman, Kulanu's first vice president, who is the person perhaps most responsible for Kulanu being so widespread. You could see that one of the things that Kulanu has done that's one of our most important functions is to put so many Jewish communities around the world on the map. And the Primacks and Zellers started that work fabulously, but when Bonnie joined us in about 2007, we still had, a relatively shorter list, maybe 15 countries we were working with. And Bonnie said, any community that comes to us, I'll take them on, because we used to only take people if we had a volunteer to work with them. But Bonnie said, no, I'll take on any community that comes. And since then we do that. Every community that comes to us at least gets time with Bonnie, helping assess whether we can work with them. So we could go on for great length at introducing Bonnie, but I'm going to save the time for other things and just turn the program over to her.
Thank you so much, Harriet, and thank you, Molly, and thank you, everybody, for showing up today to this exciting event. It is my privilege to introduce 4 people that really started a movement in Jewish history. And I always say, like a ship, if it's moved 1 degree off course, it ends someplace else. And this movement will shape Jewish history in ways that we don't even know yet. It is with that I want to give an introduction first to Diane Zeller. She is Executive Director, Society for Intercultural Education, Training and Research, and Professional Lecturer, Georgetown University. She was a program director, oversees liaison committee of American Council on Education. She has a BA from Barnard and a certificate of African Studies, Columbia University. She has a PhD from Columbia, National Defense Foreign Language Fellow, Public Health Service Fellow, and a founder of Kulanu, Inc. Jack Zeller, Dr. Jack Zeller is, one second here. Okay, Dr. Jack Zeller, founder and president emeritus of Kulanu, is a clinical pathologist and a Jewish activist. He is a graduate of Columbia College, New York Medical College, and the College of Physicians and Surgeons, all located in New York City. Jack's activism began when he served as a board member for American Association for Ethiopian Jews. After Operation Solomon, which airlifted thousands of Ethiopian Jews to Israel, Jack and his wife Diane, a specialist in African history, decided to take on the broader issue of dispersed and isolated Jewish communities. After working with an Israeli-based organization called Amishav, Jack founded Kulanu, serving as its president for 14 years. Aron Primack is a retired civil rights attorney. Her favorite volunteer activity has always been her work for Kulanu. She edited Kulanu's quarterly newsletter. She and her husband, Aron, were part of a 15-member Kulanu delegation to visit the Abiyadaya Jews of Uganda. Impressed by the community's exciting liturgical and everyday music, she arranged for a field recording to be made and produced Kulanu's first CD, Shalom Everybody Everywhere. Aron also edited Kulanu's first book, Jews in Places You Never Thought of. This was followed by Under One Canopy readings in Jewish diversity. This book features the writings of 50 diverse Jews from around the globe, and as Harriet mentioned, to become a sponsor, you will get a copy of this book sent to you. Dr. Primack is also a physician. He's an anthropologist, teacher, and former national NIH administrator for third world training programs. He and his family lived in East Africa in the 1970s, where he did cancer research, and West Africa in the 1990s, where he was a Peace Corps doctor. He and his family tried to find Jewish communities wherever they go. He is an activist in Kulanu, an organization that assists lost and dispersed Jewish communities. Okay, so thank you, founders. I'm going to start by asking you some questions. Rabbi Avichal is a rabbi that has passed away recently that looked for lost tribes around the world. He was a member of the Rabbanut in Israel, and that was his task, to bring dispersed Jews from the 4 corners of the world in fulfillment of a prophetic vision. He founded an organization called Amishav, which means my people return, and that was his goal, for people of lost tribes to return to Israel as a sign of bringing the Messiah and the end of times. My first question to you is, why, who, I know you met Rabbi Avichal, and why did you start American Friends of Amishav, and what was your interactions with Rabbi Avichal?
Well, let's step back a little bit. I had come out of the Washington Association for Ethiopian Jews, which was founded by Eddie Eiches, and we became friends, and we worked very hard there and with the American Association for Ethiopian Jews, and we had to convince the rabbis in the greater Washington area that Ethiopian Jewry was very important, but it was actually part of a bigger story. And so we sort of wandered from Ethiopian Jewry into world Jewry, because I felt that to only speak about Ethiopian Jewry was not quite fair to the congregations who we tried to successfully to organize. So as a result of all of that, we decided about this guy, Rabbi Avichal, because we knew that he had the best collection of information about lost Jewish communities throughout the world. And we were sort of touching on them, and all of a sudden, you know, how could we ignore it? So we weren't really, well, we didn't have our minds made up that we're going to do something. We just went to visit him in Jerusalem, in his apartment, and it was an amazing experience. He had a wall with thousands and thousands of documents about people who had written to the chief rabbi's office saying that they make a claim to being Jewish, and all kinds of people who were Jews by choice and Jews who claimed to be the seed of Israel. And it was really amazing. And he asked us to bring Amishav to the United States. And Diane and I, in sort of a, we really didn't know what we were doing, but we didn't say no. So we said yes. And we really didn't succeed very well until Rabbi Avichal himself came to Washington, and he gave this very, very large talk, maybe hundreds of people in it at Or Kodesh. And among the people who were there were Aron and Aaron Primack. And Rabbi Avichal recruited them. And it was because of their, everything else you know about Aron and Aaron, that we were able to take this Amishav USA into something very powerful and real. We were as diverse as Rabbi Avichal. He had in his wall, he had all kinds of correspondences from all kinds of people. So we decided to focus on that diversity while he was focusing mostly on the B'nai Menashe and Mizoram and Manipur. And then it became, as Israel politics always is, with the chief rabbis who were giving Rabbi Avichal all this information, said, well, you know, what's going on? Because these people really are going their own way. So Rabbi Avichal said that, you know, you're doing fine. I love you all. Just keep it up. Just change your name. So it was a very friendly conversation. I think we almost expected it to be coming. And we had a big meeting at the Primack's house. And the Primacks were able to we had 50 name candidates and a room full of people. And we had a wonderful discussion. And at the end of it all, we came up with the name of Kulanu, which I think was a great choice. And even though the identity of Kulanu had been born before the name came, the name empowered us. And so sometimes great things happen just by random chance, or even what might be viewed as an adverse interaction. We were told we can't be Amishav USA. And it turned out, as Bonnie has shown, that the collection that Rabbi Avichal had, and now the collection that Kulanu have, are of comparable dimensions. They are enormous. And so people always ask, how could this possibly be? And that's one of the great things about Kulanu, is because every community has a different story, and each story is just as valuable as the other. So Kulanu means all of us, because we weren't going to tell anyone that they didn't have an address. All the other Jewish organizations ignored them. We wanted to say, you are real, and we've been succeeded, and we've done more than that. But if we only did that, that was enough.
Thank you, Jack. So the name Kulanu meant all of us, and it changed because some of your goals changed from Rabbi Avichal's goals. That's correct? And I personally want to wish you happy anniversary today. I feel very privileged to have this on your anniversary day. So what were some of your early challenges and successes?
I can give you some of that information. The first challenge, obviously, was what every group has, and that is trying to raise money to get started. It was a new organization. Even though Amishav had already been going for some months, this was new enough, and we had to get the word out. Second challenge is always getting volunteers. Every time we heard about a new group that called or wrote to us and said, we would like some help, we had to find people who were willing to do the work. It was a challenge. We also had to spread the word of what we were doing. That is, in order to get both money and volunteers. And that was the development of the newsletter that Karen edited for 15 years, and that had remarkable articles, one after another. It was all really unbelievable who was contacting us and how we were trying to get that information out. We also had a challenge of venues, getting places to have meetings, either our own meetings for administrative purposes or meetings to try to tell people about the unbelievable, fantastic groups that we were coming into contact with. We had issues with connection. Obviously, the internet was not really up and running for us at the very beginning. But even once we were able to get internet up and running, all those groups that were contacting us didn't have, at the moment, even hope of having an internet connection. So bad telephone call connections and writing letters and so forth was the way. You're going to hear later about the Abiyudaya that we heard about from a letter. And then lastly, sort of going back to where I started, publicity. It was very difficult to get appropriate publicity, but the newsletter was the biggest beginning to that, and then of course it became word of mouth.
I just want to add something about publicity. When I started the newsletter, I had no idea how valuable it would be in certain respects. When we visited the Abiyudaya in Uganda, they were not known, and there was a lot of persecution by the other religions directed toward them. And one of the things they told us, visitors, was that they wanted to be in touch with world Jewry and to be known so that they wouldn't die like a snake in the grass and have nobody know. So that's what the newsletter helped do, and I'm proud of that. That was one of our successes, I think. So in addition to its other informative functions, it's this sort of pervasive, now you know about it. In addition to wonderful progress we had with the Abiyudaya, a very gifted group, Oh, I have to say their music. Their music was one of our successes, as well as theirs, of course. When we went to our first service there and heard Lachadodi, the way they did it with the African melody, it was just so awesome. We understood what Matt Meyer had said when he said that his Judaism was sort of fading, but when he visited the Abiyudaya and heard Lachadodi, he was back into the fold. So we did put out a CD with that music, and that's some of the other groups that we've really succeeded with because they've succeeded.
You froze on my screen. Okay.
Pardon me? Did somebody say something? The Inca Indians of Peru, in Trujillo, Peru, were obviously not Jews in their roots anywhere. And they found Judaism when, as they were marching to church on a Sunday, they were Catholic, they came across Psalm 141, which talks about a God who neither slumbers nor sleeps. And they said, oh, we need a 24-hour God. That's for us. And they so valiantly pursued this goal. And they got a wonderful rabbi, a Lubavitcher rabbi, Zuber, Myron Zuber, to assist them. It all went wonderfully, and they made their way to Israel. So good was his conversion. And they assimilated perfectly. People comment on how well they assimilated. They didn't keep to themselves. Another interesting group for us was the Puebla Jews. These were descendants of Marranos, or B'nai Anusim, and they had problems in Mexico because the Jews of Mexico wouldn't have anything to do with them. They were social inferiors, so they got no assistance from the Mexico City Jews, not even to be admitted to the synagogue. So they taught themselves through books, and they finally found Rabbi Shmuel Lehrer, who was the only rabbi in all of Mexico who did conversions. He did conservative conversions. He had a conservative congregation, a large one. So he has converted 2,000 people to conservative Jewry. Sometimes people want an Orthodox conversion, and he can't provide that, but Rabbi Avichel has come to some of these people whom he knows and gives them an Orthodox conversion and makes them able to make Aliyah. So there's some of our successes.
Wow, thank you, Karen. There's so many of them.
Yep.
And you were the models that brought Kulanu to the place where it is now. We're in many, many more countries. And the same issues that you had to deal with, we're dealing with now. I think it's time for a photo exhibit that we have. Right, Molly?
This is 1995. Video taken by Elaine Berg of blessed memory. This is the Kulanu board meeting at the Primack's home.
That was our first retreat, I think.
Karen, will you narrate?
This is the product that we produced, the newsletter and the 2 books and 1 CD at first. J.J. Keki, who was the most musical perhaps of the Abiyudaya, and that's saying a lot, put out a 2nd CD with his family. There's a little bit of overlap between the 2, but you can really use both if you don't have them. They're different enough. This was the baked in Uganda in 2002. I was leading the women to the river, and the men you see are the baked in. And it was a rollicking good walk up and down through the fields, but we made it to the river. Honey?
Yeah, that's, I was visiting, this is Uganda, this is Mbale, the closest big town to the Abiyudaya. Their matoke, which is their main food, a plantain, and one of the people there with their very specific Uganda dress and children. Uganda markets are markets are the lifeline of all African countries. These are Abiyudaya Kipot. When we were there in 1995, they were all wearing kipot, but the kipot were made by their Muslim neighbors. We suggested that they learn how to make them, and we would then sell them for them. They, within 2 days, made a whole set of a kipot that we bought ourselves, and they've been shipping them to the U.S. ever since, and we sold many in their name and sent them the funds. As I understand it, about $70,000 worth.
This is an Indonesian carving that had nothing to do with Kulanu at the time, but it resided at our home and welcomed all the people who came to meetings there. Now, of course, we have a group in Indonesia, so it seems even more appropriate. The baked-in, the people who attended the mission, including the baked-in members, and the wonderful musician, Laura Wetzler, and she brought her drummer along, and a journalist is also there among us.
Yeah, that's Diane and myself in retirement. This was a Kulanu meeting, I think, at the Primack's house, where our first retreat, where we decided to look at each other and talk rather than to just talk through the phone or some other way. It was a great meeting. We all looked so much younger then. I actually,
I can identify this. I'm sorry, this was when we brought, I think, Modric Maricera to the United States for the first time. And this is Jack and Diane with two Ethiopian, well, one Ethiopian American leader in New York and one member of the African American Jewish community who are good friends of theirs. But this was, I think, at the 92nd Street Y at a reception after one of our speakers.
This is George Savakapana from Kulanu's Harare Lemba Synagogue in Zimbabwe. George was invited to join us here in Israel and to study at a very prestigious yeshiva, Or Stone, and we enjoyed the time that he was here immensely, and we really got to know him very well.
That was when I was young.
That's Jack at our house. I have to say that seeing Diane with the Harari representative, it reminded me of how there was always somebody actually living with them for whatever amount of time they needed while they were getting adjusted or doing what they had come to do. Their home was the most welcome place in the world. The hospitality was sensational.
And of course, that was also true of the Primack's home. They didn't necessarily live there, but I know I spent many welcome nights at their home.
But their guests were more long-term.
This is Kulanu's computer with 3 of our young supporters from Kenya.
Here's the famous Lakado D.
The first time that Kulanu people heard it.
I think I have to say, you can't imagine what it was like to hear that version coming from people who had written it with no Western connection. It was so uplifting and so fantastic. And it's interesting how they have incorporated into the Hebrew a little bit of the local language, Luganda, with that likrati kala, because most of the words end in vowels. But it was just unbelievable to hear it.
And as most of you probably know, the tune has really caught on, and congregations across the country and possibly across the world are using this melody for Lakado D. They pick it up from the CD.
Wasn't this CD submitted into one of the awards, the Grammy Awards, on an international competition?
I think that was the psalm, one of the psalms that Summit did.
Yes, the Smithsonian Folk Arts produced a second CD
Right.
produced by Rabbi Jeffrey Summit that had many of the same songs, and that's the one that was nominated for a Grammy in world music. They lost to Ladysmith Black Mambazo.
Right.
Oh, okay. And we say again, thank you to our sponsors for helping us honor the Primacks and the Zellers for their amazing work, and especially for doing this, it turns out, on both their anniversaries. Today is the Zellers anniversary, and is it yesterday that was the—
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow is the Primacks. I think one is the 59th of the Zellers and the 54th of the Primacks. So we're thrilled to be celebrating with them at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, Bonnie, you can take it back.
Okay, so I had one more question, and that was, how have you seen Kulanu grow over the many years?
Well, I have been so impressed with Harriet, who has been able to just accomplish so much. And the people she has chosen to work with, she's always had such a strong staff, such strong volunteers. It's so amazing. They have picked up 14 more communities in the last 10 years. And it'll just take a few seconds to list them. And of course, they're in alphabetical order, not in chronological order. But we have Cameroon, Colombia, Cote d'Ivoire, Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, El Salvador, Gabon, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Pakistan, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Tanzania. Amazing.
I would like to add Madagascar. That was one of our big
Ooh.
one of our big successes was the development of a Jewish community that's pretty well established, that has several hundred people in it now in Madagascar.
We
Okay.
also have a community in Zimbabwe. in
That's
Harare.
left over.
Okay, and there may be several more that we just got that's probably on no one's list in Latin America. As a matter of fact, I just worked this morning on a presentation that will be taught to over 40 women in Latin America in Spanish on how to keep a kosher home. Okay.
Where will it be?
El Salvador, Ecuador, and I think Costa Rica. So, I mean,
Yeah.
the communities, I feel that the communities grew because of access to the internet. And Kulanu has a technology fund that when we find out that a community has difficulty in communicating with the outside world, our technology fund helps them get little computers, cell phones, and we've even put in some solar panels to make sure they have some electricity to charge their batteries. I'd
just like to add, I see Rick Gold is here. One of the problems is we accomplished so much that we just, and the newsletters and magazines, and include a website, have massive amounts of information, including the great contribution made by Rick Gold to the North African Jewry Timbuktu. Just so many people who knew so much, who made so many contributions, and the only way you can find out about them is to go into the Kulanu website and just either go through the newsletters or do search words. And Rick Gold is one of the people who was an amazing early contributor, and he told us exactly what Timbuktu is all about. And to this day, it's a landmark event in Jewish history, I think.
Thanks, Jeff.
You should also be aware that Kulanu has the largest online photography archive in the world. And if you go to our photo, the link on our webpage, you will come up with photographs taken over many years by many people that document the growth and the Jewishness of these communities. Okay, I think now we're going to break in. Oh, I think Molly now is going to ask some of the questions that we saw on the chats. Is that correct?
Correct. So if you have a question that you'd like to be answered by any of our panelists, please type it into the chat and I'll be reading the questions and asking our panelists. So we've had one question come in so far, and that was regarding the community in Colombia. So I'm not sure if anyone's aware of any connections to a community in Cartagena, Colombia.
I can respond to that one.
Okay.
We work closely with Rabbi Juan Mejia, who works with Jewish communities in Colombia. We were close to sending a teacher to that community this summer. I'm not sure, I actually am not sure which communities in Colombia he was asking us to work with. So I don't know if it's the same one that you mentioned. But we do have
referring to the community in Cartagena with Rabbi Joaquin Montoya.
Okay, I don't know of a connection with Rabbi Joaquin Montoya. Okay, but
He's got a great story. He's got a great story that I think many of you will enjoy. He was involved in a Christian church, and he became a medical doctor. And after discovering his Jewish roots, he went to Israel, became a rabbi, and now is a rabbi, a medical doctor, and also performs some of the circumcisions in his community. So I think we met with him several years ago on a cruise, and he tells a great story.
So perhaps you could contact us after this at kulanu.org/contact and give us more information so we can follow through with you and with him.
I'd be happy. I have some extracts from information I learned while I was there. So I'll be happy to send it to you if you could give me your email address.
Kulanu.org/contact.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So I have another question about Kulanu and getting more awareness in Israel. And so I would like Jack and Diane to speak about that since they are Kulanu in Jerusalem.
Well, we like to think we're retired, but that's not quite true. Israel has its own organizational world, and as Olim Hadashim, who never quite integrated very well, we haven't been as active as we could be, but we welcome anyone who knows of something that we should be doing in Israel, or wants to contact us, or lives in Israel, or doesn't in Israel, but wants us to do something. We've got time on our hands. We're always welcoming phone calls and Zoom and Skype and whatever.
Talking about Israel, I'm glad to announce this morning I got a message in Messenger from somebody, a South African Lemba, who just got accepted to Pardes Institute in Israel to study for the year. So Jack and Diane, I'm sure you'll be having another guest at some point.
Look forward to it.
Great. Karen, I have a question for you about the Incan Jews. Are they still an identifiable community in Israel now, or how's that working?
I don't know because I haven't ever visited them in Israel, but judging from the descriptions I've read about their successful assimilation and the fact that they are not keeping together the way so many groups do, I suspect that you would not recognize them necessarily by their ethnic traits. They would be mingled.
Yeah. Diane and I had the good fortune to be invited to a wedding from the community, and sitting next to us was the Rabbi Eliyahu Birnbaum, who made the best din for us from Israel for this community. So there's tremendous continuity, and we're still good friends. Wow. And he's now at Torah Stone, and he's has a system for welcoming Kulanu candidates to study in Orstone Yeshiva. We had tremendous influence on other people, but it was great to see him at this wedding, and the wedding was amazing, and the people are so successful and so comfortable in Israel. When Bob Land, who really masterminded this, was in the earliest stages, he looked to me and he said, you know, is this going to work? And he didn't know, and I didn't know, but he was more sure that it would. And all credit to Bob for persisting, arranging the best in, and creating what is now an amazing community.
Great. So we're having some questions come in about specific communities and people wanting to know if Kulanu has been in touch with anyone in the former Yugoslavia or the Balkans, as well as Eritrea, and as well as China. So I don't know if anyone has any experiences with the communities there that they'd like to share.
The Kaifeng Jewish community, the leadership of it has fallen to Michael Freund, who is Shabbat Israel, and it's the Chinese government, despite the amazing efforts Shushan made to give them some room, they have been sort of shut down, but there are enough people in Israel from the community to represent it, and so that they, their connection, even though it may be diminished now, will never be lost.
Thank you.
This is Dan Levitsky. Can I add something about the Chinese connection?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, and I serve on the Sino-Judaic Institute board, and I am periodically in communication with Shirley, who had been on speaking tours for Kulanu here in the States. And the problem that we're facing there is that the Chinese government wants nothing to do with any NGOs, any non-governmental organizations. So we're exploring, we met with the Chinese in Chicago when we had a board meeting, and we're exploring other ways to still support people there, but without any NGO participation.
Thank you. Thank you for the follow-up.
Great, thank you. I have another question coming in about how Kulanu deals with issues that cut across communities such as religious, racial, and ethnic discrimination. So I'm sure over the years that has been an issue. How has that been dealt with?
I would like to, I think there probably are better people to address this issue than I am. The only piece I would add to this is that racial issues are very different in Latin America and in Africa and around the world, so that the politics of America are not necessarily the same as the racial issues that you might come across in Peru or Mexico. Or, so I think there are people here that could probably answer that more precisely. Is there?
I'm not sure I understood the question, but we have been disappointed with the reception the Abba Yudaya have received in Israel. People have gone there with acceptances from yeshivas, and they've been turned around at the airport and sent home. So there have been some people who have gotten through to study, but there are also some disappointments.
It's a very complicated, I mean, that's a complicated question. Yeah, Jack.
Let me just add that I've dealt with some people who, from Latin America, who have Jewish roots, don't have Jewish roots, and their effort to get through the Misrat HaPanim is really very, very difficult. The Misrat HaPanim doesn't trust anyone, and independent of the where they come from, the color of their skin, even if they contain Zera Yisrael and they can prove it, they still have a very difficult time. I've done some work with some of those people, so I can speak firsthand. We have a problem in Israel, basically, with the Ministry of Interior that they call the Misrat HaPanim. It's a big problem, and someday we're going to get past it, and then the problem of getting a Bayadaya or Jews of any skin color is going to be much less relevant.
But I would add that in Israel, as is around the world, the issues of immigration are a huge political football. And as, I mean, for America, it's certainly a hotbed, and in Israel, immigration's a hotbed. So it complicates the story when you have different kinds of politics around immigration.
Wouldn't you say that immigration is one of the reasons for the founding of Israel?
For the founding of Israel. I don't know how to answer that.
For the existence of Israel. Immigration of a certain kind.
If it gives anyone consolation, I can tell you that the Jewish Agency, which really supports Olim, all kinds of Olim, visited the Abaya Daya and all that, they have just as much problem as Kulanu. This is a very, very big problem. It's not about tiny little Kulanu. It's much larger. I don't know how to deal with it except to try and just work around the edges. So for instance, the Abaya Daya get turned off at the airport. You know, some others come in with great difficulty. We got the lumber to come and study in the Cameroon. So it's hit and miss. It's a problem that's bigger than Kulanu. I think we're the battering ram, and you know, a gentle, loving battering ram. And I think we're doing the right thing. And sooner or later, things are going to get better. And meanwhile, we shouldn't give up, and we shouldn't really, we can't really feel badly that we're not successful. The Jewish Agency has just as much trouble as we do, and I speak from my experiences with them.
I agree.
I can say that there are other issues of discrimination as well. In some of our communities are in worlds where there are mainstream Jewish communities that are predominantly white. And in many of those communities around Latin America where there are white Jewish communities, there have been challenges in terms of them refusing to accept the groups that we're working with who are returning to Judaism or choosing Judaism for the first time. And often there's a racial or economic disparity that's that appears to be part of the problem. In other places where, in Africa, for example, where there's no white Jewish community, there can be tensions with people of other religions, although several of our communities have done an amazing job of keeping peace with their Christian and Muslim neighbors. For example, the Abaya Daya, who run schools that we support that are Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, living very peacefully together. And we see examples of that in other communities as well.
And I wasn't going to say anything, but I did want to say that as to this point, I did a lot of work from 1976 until 82, pulling out Jews from the Soviet Union, and they had Jew on their passport, but they attended the churches, and they weren't really, they weren't religiously Jewish in any way. They were all let in. And then when we started dealing with the Ethiopians, they were always questioned. I mean, it was like race was a big issue. I mean, just like in this country, race was critical in the whole way the Israeli government dealt with the issue, whether it's throwing out the blood of Ethiopian Jews who donated blood to in a drive because the Ethiopian Jewish blood was tainted with AIDS. I mean, it's a long history. It's a pretty ugly history. And for sure, when you're dealing with, for example, in Mexico City, a newer community that is darker, the white Jews won't let them into the into the clubs. I mean, racism is very much part of a lot of this. And they sometimes say, oh, it's not racism. It's, it costs so much to absorb these people. But truthfully, it is color and it is racism.
Well, some of it has to do with the whole who is a Jew question. And in Latin America, most of Latin America, they don't accept any converts. So it doesn't matter who and what and where. If you're not accepting any converts, you know, and you're suspect of converts. I mean, the conversion issue, even in America, is kind of our, you know, a mixed bag, where if you're a convert, you have to always say you are. It kind of like, it comes out. And while there are communities that have worked on this issue, many converts and really Orthodox converts all are doing a lot of self-explaining. And we try to be open to the whole conversion thing in America, but certainly in Latin America, they don't know what to do with it. And the doors are shut even if people show papers, you know, so it's very complex. It's social, it's economic, it's you know, it's a mixed problem. Yeah, challenge. I think it'll get better, like Jack said. I think the politics around conversion in Israel will be changing. I think it's a matter of politics. They've come a long way. Kulanu does have some backdoor keys to let people in. There have been some of Kulanu members that have made Aliyah. You know, we do have back doors to get some of the stuff done as long as we don't make it political. So I think there's hope in that. The other point I'd like to make is that most of the communities that I dealt with, that I personally have dealt with, were not interested in Aliyah. They were interested in staying with their families and doing their business in communities that they're in. And I know I was in Cote d'Ivoire for one thing. It was a very wealthy community, and they absolutely have no intention of doing anything more than visiting Israel. And, you know, so this is complicated. I think we need to move it. We were going to break into groups.
Thank you, Bonnie. We're going to have Harriet close us out now. Thank you, everyone, for adding to the discussion. Harriet?
Okay. 1 minute, please. First of all, I want to repeat that we're so delighted to be honoring the Primacks and the Zellers and for their amazing contribution and celebrating their anniversaries with them. And if you wish a copy of the book Under One Canopy, you're welcome to still be a sponsor. But more generally, I want to say before we close that I want to thank all of you who have donated to Kulanu over the years. Your continued support has meant so much to all of us and to all of our Kulanu communities. In these challenging economic times, when we can't be sure what turn the economy will take, your support is needed more than ever. Each community has immediate needs, and some of these needs are of an emergency nature. We thank you in advance for whatever you can do to ease these financial burdens. We hope that each of you will dig deep in your pocket, and whether that comes out with $5 or $50,000, whatever you can do, you know, according to your ability, is deeply appreciated. And we thank you so much. We're now going